Wake up, Collins. Sarge's gruff voice roused me from my sleep, making me shake the exhaustion from my bones. The AR was still resting on my knee, hand around the grip and at the ready. Prisoners coming in. We're making the jump soon. This was the third jump I've been on this month, and it was getting exhausting. Ever been molecularized through a teleporter through space? Yeah, not a fun experience. Not to mention having to stay for a few days in Cerberus is going to be a bitch. The gravity change alone is going to wreak havoc on my stomach. We've got a big one today. The Sarge stood at the front of the briefing room, looking us all down. Real goddamn monster. The Blackwater Ripper killed 70 people in the span of one night. A picture flashed up on the screen. Just a scrawny little guy, bags under his eyes. Didn't look like he could hurt a store mannequin, much less 70 people in one night. Oh shit, I heard about this guy. Perkins said from another seat. His eyes narrow, looking closer at the picture of the man. Asshole looks like he never left his basement. Yeah, you would think. 70 people with their insides shredded say otherwise. Almost half of them kids. This damn monster went on a killing spree at a birthday first, then made his way through most of the neighborhood he lived in. All ripped out, like a damn animal was eating them. Sarge continued, shouting and red-faced. Wasn't often that we got a transfer that riled him up, but this guy touched a nerve. Thought they said it was a shooting? Matthew asked, but Sarge shook his head. No, they were torn apart. Called it a shooting to keep the public from going crazy with the details. Sarge was more on edge, with a steel in his voice that I had only heard in the most tense situations. Hey Sarge, you're awfully pissed about this guy. Perkins spoke up, noticing just as I did. Sarge shook his head, looking down for a moment. That happened back home. I knew some of those people. Went to school with them. Seeing those crime scene photos is one of the few things that's gonna haunt me. He said, before composing himself once more. Alright, they're bringing him in now. We've got a quick jump up there, then a 24-hour security hold to make sure he doesn't just croak when he goes through the diffusion. Would that really be so bad? Matthews asked, from his corner of the room. He was leaning forward, gone off leaning against the wall. Eyebrows raised. He just shrugged his shoulders when Sarge glared at him. Just saying, an airlock wouldn't cost as many taxpayer dollars. I want to as much as the next person, but we're sworn to our duty. You know with your clearance, we can't just do that kind of shit. Sarge replied. Even the dumbass president doesn't know we exist. You think someone's gonna be mad for murking a murderer? Perkins spoke again, chuckling. Another glare shut him down, but he was still breathing out of his nose, laughing to himself. Collins, I want you and Matthews on rear guard. Standard formation. We're going to 2x2 system. Me and Perkins first, then the perp, then you two. From there, you know the walk toward the main facility. All the standard shit. Just another routine transfer as far as we're concerned. Sarge finished his orders, looking at all of us for confirmation that we understood. Yes, sir. All echoed at once as we filed out of the room, toward the transport station. The prisoner was standing by the door, chains on hands and feet. Nobody knew what the hell he could do, or how he did the murders apparently. I heard the story on the news, but there wasn't any way someone this scrawny could have done it. Philip Kent, Sarge said, stiff but loud, so the little man heard. He jumped, frightened by the loud voice as his glasses almost fell off. Brown hair, shaggy down to his neck almost, with a massive pair of old Coke bottle glasses. The guy looked like a Dahmer for the new age. You understand that you have been waived trial rights due to the nature of your crimes? Please, where are we? I don't even know what I did. He was almost in tears, begging and pleading. The bags under his eyes were more exacerbated than the pictures, and the eyes themselves were almost bloodshot. I just woke up in blood. I don't know how I got there. They told me I killed people, but I couldn't kill people. I wouldn't. Please, you believe me, right? Shut up. Do you understand that you will be effectively a dead man when it comes to any record of your life? You as a person no longer exist. Sarge continued. Everything from here on out is off the books, does not exist, and that includes you. You are being transferred to Cerberus, where you'll be locked in and promptly forgotten by the rest of the world. At this point, he was just streaming tears, close to falling to his knees. I started to feel sorry for him, but then remembered what Sarge had said about those people he killed. There was something this guy was hiding behind this pitiful act. Sarge pushed Kent into the diffusion room, where 2 techs stood on standby in front of a console. Sarge situated Kent in the 3rd silver pot on the wall, sealing it shut while the prisoner just kept crying. Then, Sarge climbed into the 1st, while Perkins took his spot in the 2nd. Matthews and I climbed into the last 2 on the other side of Kent. Diffusion initializing, one of the techs said through a small speaker in the tube. It was cramped, with only the small window to see outside through. I took a deep breath, knowing it could be a couple of minutes before it sent me up. The silver they used to make the pots smelled like an old jewelry store, making me think of times when I didn't know a secret government prison was on the fucking moon. All I could do was sigh though. These things might be cutting-edge tech, but the transfer rate is slow and has to be done one by one so we don't fuse or some crazy science mumbo-jumbo. I fell asleep during the presentation on it. I closed my eyes, letting myself forget I was in a tube about to get broken down to a genetic level and sent through space. When they told me I was getting a promotion from being in Spec Ops for so long, telling me that it was an easy, cushy job with very little work, they really should have elaborated. Would have been nice to know ahead of time if it involved teleporting to the moon. Collins, you're up. The voice came again. I felt the lights go down and saw the darkness creep in. The feeling started from down in my toes first, everything coming apart as I broke down. It was an odd sensation, kinda like when a limb falls asleep. Everything started coming back together, even as I felt my consciousness drifting through space toward the moon. I felt the weightlessness take a hold for a moment, and then I was grounded again, though a little bit lighter than before. My gun was still firmly at my side, with nothing out of place. I made these jumps dozens of times, but it still felt really odd to go through this. Go back! I heard this scream before I could see the scene outside of my pod window. Crimson was everywhere, even across the plexiglass that covered my own pod opening. There were sprays of blood, and through the corner I could see a body. Blood was pulled in all around them, and there was way more than any one human body could hold. Get the hell out of here, damn it! Tell them to stop sending people! The blood sprayed again, before I could hear a gunshot followed by a massive guttural roar. I saw Sarge backing up toward my pot, holding onto his pistol while aiming at some massive creature moving closer toward him. I could see the blood shimmering off of it in the reflected sunlight of the moon as it stalked closer, Sarge firing off more bullets as it did. Nothing seemed to work, and he just kept coming. Sir, I'm not going to leave you here. What happened? I screamed through the window. He grunted back, firing again, but this time at the thing's feet. There wasn't any sign it had an effect, and the creature just kept coming towards us with no regard. The other tube finally beeped, and I could see the door open while Matthew stepped out. The hell, Sarge? He said, before the thing grabbed him, biting hard on his neck. I had to do something, so popped open my door and hefted the rifle to my shoulders, aiming straight for the thing's head. A 3-round burst flew out of the chamber but bounced off and pinged at the floor after hitting the thing's skull. I could see it more clearly now, fur matted with blood from the techs. Perkins was lying in a corner, hand to his neck as it was oozing blood. He was still alive, but there was no way he was fighting. Matthews was in the same spot now, with a gaping wound in his neck. Perkins started to stand up as Sarge shouted him down. Stop before you bleed out, idiot! Sarge fired more rounds into the beast, again bouncing off without harm. Its eyes were glowing red, with fangs dripping blood in the moonlight. I stepped back, not sure what to do when Perkins began to change. It looked like he started seizing, but after a moment, fur began to sprout. He screamed in anguish, face contorting as something happened. The bones in his face looked like they were breaking and reforming, reconnecting into some new creature. The teeth in his mouth grew to massive fangs, bones bursting forth from his fingertips into sharp claws. I could see Matthews beginning to undergo the same thing. "Run!" Sarge shouted at me, pushing me toward the main corridor to the prison. "Get the hell out of here! Hide!" We began to run through the tunnel, only the occasional fluorescent light every few feet to light the way. Plexiglass windows, thick to keep up from depressurizing, gave a view of the rocky moon's surface outside. The earth sat far from the horizon, like a distant dream of safety. The blue water looked like the safest place in the universe, but the moon was thousands of miles away from any body of water. I could tell Sarge was hurt, limping as we ran. A fucker cut my ankle when I unlocked this spot. Don't know what the fuck happened, but soon as it was up here, shit went south. He grumbled as we kept our pace down the tunnel. The airlock was ahead, a guard standing behind it, waiting for us to reach them. The look of surprise on their face told me they weren't prepared for anything that was about to go down. "Open the damn door!" The man scrambled, hitting the button to let us through. The noises behind us were unworldly, like howls from the jaws of hell. They were getting closer, rounding the curve right along a blood trail left by Sarge. We got through the door, repeatedly mashing the buttons to close it before turning around and hefting my gun. "No, hide. This thing isn't something we can just fight off," Sarge said, ushering me toward one of the large storage lockers in the corner. I opened the door, flinging things to the side and stepping in before closing it. I tried to keep my gun where it could be aimed and shot immediately, but there wasn't any guarantee it would happen fast enough to save us. "I'm going to lead them away. Once they're gone, you two go back to the teleporter." "The fuck is happening down there?" A yell came from the upper part of the base, where the cells were lined up above. The other guards must have been in the monitoring station on the other side. "Get the warden!" The airlock guard shouted back. A clamor rose up among the cells above, most with the resounding sentiment of, "Fuck the warden." "Jackasses. I don't have a radio. I'm going to run and notify the others." "No. Best you can do is barricade until everyone can get to the pods. These things ain't hit by regular bullets," I said, still watching them through the locker slats. The beasts finally reached the door, slamming against it with tremendous force. I'm surprised it didn't give then and there, and they kept slamming through it. "Sarge, what are we going to do?" "Fuck, alright. You go warn the others to barricade themselves. Collins, once they're past here and you can get out, go back to the pods and get a message back home," he said, backing toward the next hallway as the airlock guard took off running down it. "You get out of here. That's an order." "Yes, sir," I said, keeping my eyes trained on him as the plexiglass finally gave a resounding crunch. The entire glass shattered, leaving massive shards everywhere on the floor. The three came through, Perkins and Matthews, now both hulking beasts just like Kent became. "Come on, bastards," Sarge said, firing off a shot at one and leading them into the hall. They kept running after him, gaining quick as he limped. Prisoners along both levels in the hall started shouting, some screaming in fear. The beasts seemed to have gotten distracted by the new canned food all around them, because one turned to the nearest cell right through the door, reaching through to grab the inmate inside before he could move back far enough. Crimson bloomed forth on the white prison jumpsuit, and the man fell back screaming in terror as the beast again pulled him toward their jowls. Their snout was narrow enough to get through the bars, biting the man inside. I had to put a hand over my mouth as they began making their way, the newest bitten now turning like the rest. The howling just kept growing as they increased their numbers, and I could hear useless gunshots going off over the chaos. We'll be lucky if someone doesn't break a hole in the pressurized system. Then again, it may be a mercy if all of us are just sucked into the vacuum of space, never to speak of what happened here. When the coast finally seemed clear, or clear enough where I could get through without being seen, I slowly made my way out of the locker, making sure to keep my head on a swivel for any beasts that may be lurking in wait. Nothing I could see, So I started off down the corridor, making my way back to the pot bay. The blood trails were still fresh, and the three had only sprayed more around during their rush after us. I finally got to the pot room to see the floor almost completely covered in blood in the crumpled space. It took me a moment, but once my footsteps from the hall stopped echoing, I could hear muffled breathing. "Oh my god, is someone alive in here?" I said, trying not to be too loud just in case. Suddenly, a head popped up from behind the tech station, fur and snout covered in fresh blood from a corpse on the floor. They must not have turned immediately like the others. Shit. I tried my best to duck, barely managing to sidestep it but slipping in the blood. I somehow kept on my feet, making my way over to one of the pots. If I could get behind the pots, there may be a chance it's too big to get back there. At least I'll be safe until someone else gets here. Lunging through, I made my way in just as the beast reached an arm between two of the pots to grab me. Instead, it got stuck, too big to fit through. The creature screamed in agony, and I could see smoke rising from the arm that was stuck. "Holy shit," I said. Of course. The pots were made with an outer shell of silver because they conduct 100% electricity. Something about keeping the tech safe from the energy diffusion going on inside. All I could think of were those old Wolfman movies I watched as a kid though. It always took a silver bullet to kill a werewolf, but nobody said it had to be a bullet, right? I shot my pistol at one of the electrical tubes running from the last pot. It would put us down one for escape, but if I'm right, we can fuck these guys up and get home. The tube severed at the bullet, and I tore it off the rest of the way. The beast was standing back, studying the pots like it was trying to figure out how to get through without injury. Slowly I made my way back toward the first pot, hoping it would mirror me. It did. Okay, I whispered to myself, finally going past the last pot before quickly tucking back in as it lunged. Instead, I stuck the sharp end of the tube out, catching the beast right in the chest. It let out a final ragged howl before slowly shrinking, turning human again before letting out its last breath. Holy shit, it worked! "Collins?" Sarge's voice again, coming down the corridor back to us. He fired off a couple of shots behind him and shouted ahead. "If you're in there, you better be ready." Sir, they're werewolves." I met him at the door, brandishing the tube so he could see. "Silver kills them. Look." He looked at the dead body on the ground, snatching the tube from me before pushing me backward into the first pot, the door still open from when he got out just minutes ago. Before I could protest, he shut the door, securing the pressure lock from the outside. "That means they can't get out of here," he said, running over to the console and slipping on the blood, using the momentum to swing around. I beat at the window on my pot, screaming at him to let me out. "Get home. Tell them don't come back up here. I'm destroying this thing." "No, sir. It's just the moon. They'll turn back." I was shouting at him over the comm speaker. He just shook his head. "It's over on, Collins. We're the only humans here now. Only ones with any way out anyway," he said, hitting buttons on the console and starting the diffusion sequence. The beasts were howling loud again, coming down the corridor after Sarge. I set a fire back there, hoping it would keep them busy. Guess that was wishful thinking. "Get in! You can't just stay here!" I shouted. Sarge smiled through at me, throwing down the rifle he was still carrying along with the silver tube. Instead, he reached onto his back, holding up a grenade. I could feel my limbs turning tingly, things beginning to break down as I was being transferred through space. The last image I got of him was a flood of fur and blood coming through the door. Fangs tore into the Sarge as he smiled at me, pulling the pin and backing into the wall. My vision began to black out, phasing between up here and back on Earth. I could see the wall where Sarge was standing suddenly splatter red with blood, not exploding like he probably hoped. The next thing I knew, I was on my hands and knees, barfing back on Earth. The pod techs were horrified, afraid to touch me because of all the blood. They took me for questioning. But all I could tell them was to watch the feeds. As far as they can see, everything is still functioning. But the beasts are now just aimlessly wandering the halls. They said some people are still up there, but I think they're just going to leave them. There's no way anyone is going back up there, and Sarge did enough damage to the diffusion console that it won't work on that end. I think they're going to discharge me. Probably a nice pension somewhere out on the coast. I'm definitely taking any kind of retirement they throw my way. They at least owe it to me. After that,